This episode is brought to you by our friends Ricky and Kelly at Groenfell and Havoc Meaderies. I asked Ricky the mead maker what to talk about this week, and he said Hop Swarm from Havoc. Hop Swarm is a deliciously dry-hopped mead made with wildflower honey and 7 different hops. And since the hops are never boiled, Hop Swarm has a complex floral taste with almost no bitterness. It's a great transition into craft mead for craft beer lovers. And here's a secret. If you go to groenfell.com/recipes, you can find a homebrew recipe for Hop Swarm along with other delicious craft meads. In the meantime, order your own cans of Hop Swarm along with other delicious craft meads at family-owned and operated groenfell.com. That's GROENNFELL. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, January 13th, 2022. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Adam Ross of Twin Span Brewing checks in with news of progress at Twin Span, a barley wine inspired by Mexican punch, and his experience brewing under pressure. Literally. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows, and if you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs and our brewers' logbooks. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. We've entered the next chapter in the life of my kettle-soured beer, or lack of life. I started souring it, or brewing it actually, on Christmas, and started souring on a Christmas day as well. And for those of you scoring at home, I successfully soured my wort over 48 hours with Lacto Brevis from Imperial. I boiled the wort to sanitize for 15 minutes, adding hops at the beginning of that boil. I chilled and pitched House from Imperial and then Safale US05 with no evidence of fermentation. That happened over a series of days. After talking to Alex from Imperial Technical Support, I did a forced fermentation test that proved that the wort is actually fermentable, just not very hospitable, apparently. Maybe it's more sour than my pH meter indicates? Not sure. Anyway, the next chapter begins with my pitching W15 Suburban Brett into the wort to hopefully eat into those sugars that the sour wort still holds. It's only 5 gallons of wort. Why am I being so stubborn about it? Why don't I just let it go and pour it out? Probably for the same reason I don't just buy all my beer instead of brewing a lot of it. A big part of it is the challenge, and after brewing for more than a quarter of a century, and having never been defeated by having an unfermentable wort, a line has been drawn in the sand. And plus, the wort tastes really good. And I want to turn it into a delicious beer. I have to thank Casey and Alex at Imperial Organic Yeast for holding my hand throughout this process and helping me to navigate what I might have done wrong, and there have been some things, come to find out, and to give me suggestions on ways forward. And speaking of Alex Gruber of Imperial's Technical Support, I plan to record a conversation with him for Basic Brewing Radio about troubleshooting fermentations, and that's going to happen early Friday afternoon of this week. So, email me your questions about things in your process that have you stumped on the fermentation side. Fermentation's not turning out the way you want. Have trouble tracking down recurring issues? Drop me a line at james@basicbrewing.com by Friday morning, and we'll see if we can get your questions answered. I'm also planning to call for questions on social media. Speaking of Imperial Organic Yeast, Casey says the winter seasonal from Imperial is a lager strain that's been a favorite with professional brewers and is now available for us, home brewers. L26 Pilgrimage will produce lagers with a very clean profile that can accentuate the flavors and aromas of Pilsner malt along with the aromatics of noble hops. This lager yeast is very versatile, does well for all lager styles from Helles to Doppelbock. I've got my hands on a packet of L26, and I can't wait to put it to work. it's getting to be lager season after all. And I'm open to suggestions about what lager style to tackle, something to let pilgrimage shine. Ask so let me know. Ask your local homebrew store for L26 Pilgrimage from our friends and sponsors at Imperial Organic Yeast. And, of course, check them out at imperialyeast.com. Okay, part of the fun of doing this show is following the growth and success of breweries over the years, and most of those are in my area of the country, but thanks to our conversations with Adam Ross, we've been able to chart the progress of Twin Span Brewing up in Iowa. Of course, the main fun of the thing is chatting with Adam to see how he's putting his creativity to work in his brew house. Adam Ross, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Yeah, always happy to be here, James.
Now, you're up there at the Twin Span Brewing, and where are y'all at?
We're in Bettendorf, Iowa. It's part of the Quad Cities. It's right along the Mississippi River, right there with Illinois.
I ask you that every time. It's a running thing.
And I don't know if people know what the Quad Cities are. Like around here, it's like, oh yeah, it's the QCA, yeah. But outside of 50 miles from here, probably no one knows where it is.
But last time we talked, this happens every time. It seems like it's like, is it time to talk to Adam again? It's probably been a month or so. It was August when we talked.
Yeah, it's time to talk to Adam again.
So you've had some new developments up there at Twin Span.
Yeah, we started distribution, so we are sending some kegs out just across the state. We haven't crossed, even though it's just a few minutes drive to get into Illinois. We're not distributing into Illinois yet because that's a whole other mountain of paperwork. But we've sent out as far as Des Moines, and we're starting to get more and more accounts. And this whole distribution thing, like on paper, it sounds like, hey, just take some of that batch of beer that you were going to sell at the bar and sell those kegs to someone else. And no, absolutely not. There's distribution agreements and there's scheduling, and I actually have to plan more than 3 weeks in advance. Where I'm writing down my schedule for 6 months from now, which is crazy. My mind right now is thinking about what would people want to drink in summer.
Oh wow!
I'm that far ahead, and I'm not used to that. So that's been a struggle for me.
Is it cramping your creativity?
It was. I was really stressing over it for a while, and then I realized I need to just work backwards from some big commitment. So like, I've told the distributor in February, and I have a date. It's a little ahead of Valentine's. Expect this really big chocolate stout where I've got some really fancy cocoa nibs, and in April expect this fruit beer, and then I worked backwards from there. I was trying to plan every single brew day and everything, and I just had to work back from these big commitments, and let some beers. I've had 18 beers on tap lately, and that's crazy. That's a lot of plates to keep spinning. So I'm letting a couple of these plates tip over and some beers run out. And it's unfortunately disappointed some customers. Every beer is someone's favorite. But I just have to for my own sanity and to keep beer flowing on time.
And you've got some help.
Yeah. We promoted one of our bartenders who's been super knowledgeable about beer already, and he's been poking his head in the brew house and asking questions, and eventually we asked, like, hey, do you want to help back here? So gonna get him started training here soon, and finally have a brewer's assistant in back and start offloading some of these cellar tasks and start getting a new perspective as well. He's definitely has a different taste in beers than I'm used to. He's much less traditional minded than I am with brewing.
Wow. Well, congratulations. It sounds like things are going in a positive direction all around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's way better than last year. I felt like things were slower than last year, and then I looked at the numbers, sales numbers, and it's like 3 times what it was last year.
Wow.
So, yeah, I don't know what's going on. Just keeping my head above water and brewing.
Keeping your head above water, making a wave when you can.
Right.
As the lyrics of a great TV theme song once said. That you're probably too young to know what that is, but
That's correct. It's way over my head.
I'll send you a link later. Well, first we're going to talk about some beers and talk about some techniques. And one that I want to start with is close to my heart because I brewed a rosemary beer recently, which has been featured on the video podcast, and it's just a simple lager with a fistful of rosemary branches added post-boil in like a 15-minute. It would be a hop stand, but there are no hops added at that point. I guess it's an herb stand. And I had some of it last night. It's been in the keg for a while, and it's really turning out nice. The kind of lagering in the keg is cleared it up a bit and cleaned up the taste, and I am getting more of the kind of subtle rosemary character. I was shooting for spruce or a spruce-like character. But what I'm getting is more of there's kind of a spruce-like character, but it's kind of hard to describe. What was your rosemary beer, and how was your experience?
Yeah, I did an herb stand as well, which is something I hadn't done since college. So took a bit of remembering how to do that. But no, I had I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. It was right after Dick Cantwell published his Eclectic IPAs book. I did the Rosemary IPA in there, and he must have slightly different process than me. I thought it was way too rosemary, and it was beyond sprucey. It was like pine sol type levels of, I don't know. So it scared me away. So when I approached doing a rosemary beer, and I wanted to get that kind of Christmas tree adjacent character. I went really light touch. I mean, I had a barrel and a half on our pilot system, and I did like 3 ounces of rosemary, which is, I'm going to guess, less than a fistful. I mean, there's not much there.
Now, was it stems and all, or
no? I took the stems out.
Stems and seeds.
It was a pretty pure product that I added to the beer. I removed all the needles or leaves, whatever you call them, from the stems, and which made my hands smell amazing for the rest of the day. And then I diced them real fine, and then I added them in with the hops at the hop stand, and then I added a little bit more, and I'd have to look at my notes. Dry hopping, dry herbing, I guess. And then I was getting this kind of, so the base beer was essentially, it was an homage to Sierra Nevada's Celebration, which is just one of my favorite beers. I used different malts and stuff, but it's roughly the same color and roughly the same bitterness to gravity ratio. And then I added the rosemary, and it was almost a savory character. Like I cook with rosemary quite a bit, so maybe it was just some subconscious connection for me. So I went digging around and found some spruce extract, which I had always heard from other homebrewers, just don't ever use this stuff. It's way too intense. And I added maybe an ounce to this 50 gallons of beer, and that was enough. And it ended up really nice. I mean, it was like this red IPA that you're drinking sitting underneath the real Christmas tree. And it sold out real quick.
Oh, wow.
A little disappointed because I wanted to keep drinking it when I stopped in, but what are you going to do?
Just for quality control purposes.
Right, of course.
Yeah, you went to a lot more work than I did. I just went over to the rosemary bush with a pair of scissors and, clipped off like 4 or 5 branches. And I did weigh them so I could, on the recipe, I could say how much I added. But, a lot of that weight was probably the woody stems, which, probably don't add a whole lot. But the wort, it did taste a lot more sprucey or piney or, evergreeny when it was unfermented. And then I think the fermentation took a lot of that out of it. So it probably would have benefited from like a post fermentation dry herbing. But I'm happy with the beer. It just is different from what I intended. But that's home brewing. You kind of take what you get. You're at a higher risk level than than me.
Yeah.
Even with a small batch.
I mean, I still kind of, maybe I shouldn't. I still kind of the same mindset, at least at the pilot batches, because I mean, it's a lot more beer than a 5-gallon batch, but it's still, we can advertise it as a pilot batch too, and let people know, hey, this is experimental. I didn't have to in this case. I was really proud of how it turned out. And I removed the stems because from what I've heard is. Adding any kind of bark or wood to a beer you're going to extract bitterness, and I didn't want to extract any additional bitterness. I could be way wrong there. I've never experimented with adding to a boil at least any kind of oak or wood or anything like that.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting experiment. This beer that I did was fairly low hopped. It was only hopped at the beginning of the boil, and I can't remember. Maybe it was like 2 ounces of Czech Sots, maybe. So, it wasn't meant to be a super bitter beer. So there's really no way of telling what bitterness I extracted from the wood. Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting timing too, because I either posted about it or talked about it, and you said, "Hey, I'm making one of those too."
Right.
So great minds work the same.
Yeah, there's I feel like there's this I don't want to get too far off the deep end here, James, but I feel like there's this
That's what we're all about.
Collective subconscious of brewing ideas, because and I'll tap into this later. I feel like I can tie this into a topic that you said you wanted to discuss later in the call here. But
you may have to
it's
remind
happened
me.
on multiple occasions where I think I have this brilliant idea for a beer, and then I go to the local bottle shop or whatever, and I see this brand new beer just came out from a brewery in Chicago or somewhere not too far away. And it's the same brilliant idea that I just had. So either I saw it before then, or there's some ethereal beer recipe idea cloud we're kind of tapping into.
It was on somebody's untapped post on Twitter that you scrolled past.
Right.
It just embedded itself in your mind.
Or it could have been an idea I had when I was doing that herb stand for the rosemary.
Not to be confused with a keg stand. Which is more my era, I think.
Oh, they still existed. Don't worry, those are never going away. They were still there when I went to college.
Yeah, I always hated drinking games when I was in college. I mean, this is bad to say, but it's because they slowed me down. I was like, wait, I have to wait until I bounce the quarter into the cup to drink? What?
Right. Same here, no, and maybe there's a connection there between those who homebrew end up sticking with it for a long time and had that college experience. But
yeah,
I don't need an excuse to drink.
It's not. Beer. It's an unhealthy perspective. Don't do that. Don't follow my lead in that department. It's not the healthiest thing. But there you go. So it's another beer. We're talking about kind of wintry beers or cold weather beers. We're past the holidays. We can't call them holiday beers anymore. But it's supposed to get cold here this weekend after being 70 degrees on Christmas Day, and with my brewing on the patio in shorts on Christmas Day. But one thing that goes good in the cold weather is a big old barley wine, and you've got one of those on tap.
Yeah, and I would say we can still call it a holiday beer. I mean, we got Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and we got Valentine's Day coming up.
Oh, there you go.
Only 5 weeks away. But I know, yeah, usually a holiday beer, people think Christmas, and it's unfortunate that as soon as the wrapping paper is thrown away and the tree's taken down, people aren't thinking about these beers as often, because I think that's for me, that's really when things are starting to spin up. And it finally starts to get truly, well and truly cold, at least here in the Midwest, after Christmas.
Hmm.
And so you want something like a big barley wine. And I will drink barley wine year round. I think most brewers will. But this barley wine, I've added various fruits and spices to, as I'm wont to do, to make it a little more interesting, a little more unique.
Yeah. I wouldn't know anything about that. Adding weird fruits and spices to a barley wine.
Right? You have a fruitcake barley wine,
Yeah.
don't you?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you were teeing that up for me, or
Yeah.
I really could not remember.
Yeah. That thing I talk about way too much.
Yeah, yeah. What goes into yours though?
The ingredients of a fruitcake. You got molasses. You got candied like pineapple and clove and cinnamon and nutmeg and oh God, it's been so long since I've brewed it. It's basically and nuts. Although the nuts just float on the top and bob around mostly, but and it actually turned out pretty good. And we were sent some examples of that for the disaster show, and they were I think they were better than mine, but that's just me. So yeah, lots of spice, lots of fruit, and lots of sugar, and it turned out pretty good. Yeah, and
Awesome.
what's yours inspired by?
Yeah, so we actually did last year a similar beer. I took some of my Belgian quadruple, and I added an actual. Our chef is from Mexico, and he said this. He was talking to me, and he said around Christmas time he likes this Ponche Navideño. I'm probably saying that wrong, but it's a Christmas punch or a winter punch,
Ooh.
and. So I actually just blended the punch in with the beer last year, and people liked it. This year, though, I said I want to build the beer from the ground up to accommodate this punch, and it just so happened that the beer I felt could do that the best was an English barley wine. So pretty simple by itself. It was just, I want to say, like 3 different malts, and most of it is Maris Otter.
Hmm.
It might even be 2. I think it just used 2. And then I added the British golden syrup to keep things a little more firmly in the English territory. And then English yeast and English hops. But then after that all fermented out, I fermented out so it was pretty dry. And truth be told, the base barley wine wasn't that great, but that was kind of by design. It was, built to accommodate these other additions.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I added quite a bit of plum puree, orange puree, and guava puree, and then tamarind paste, and quite a bit of Ceylon cinnamon. So not the the grocery store cinnamon. I feel is a little harsh. This is the I believe it's Mexican in origin as well. You get if you get it whole, you get these big loose sheets. They're not the tight little sticks.
Mm.
They're these sheets of cinnamon bark. And I feel like that's everything. I think I included everything. There was quite an ingredient list that went into this as well. But I felt the English fermentation character would pair really well with that, with those fruits and spices. A lot of Ponche uses apples, and I didn't use apples because I get off this English yeast a little bit of red apple.
Huh.
And it's also a similar reason I don't use clove in any of my beers is because apple and clove can be perceived as off flavors. Apple being, acetaldehyde, and clove being the 4-vinyl guaiacol.
Mm-hmm.
And that being the clove being a phenol, my palate's really tuned into that. So I didn't add clove here, even though Ponche will get clove as well. My pumpkin beer, I make my own spice blend because I can't find a spice blend that doesn't already include clove, and I do not think clove belongs in most beers.
Other than the yeast-driven clove from, like a Hefeweizen, say.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's just a handful of beers in my opinion, and it's my brewery, so I get to make those kind of decisions. So yeah, you won't find me adding clove to anything. That makes me shudder a little bit. And I think a lot of the bad rap beers like pumpkin beers get is because the brewer might go a little too heavy on the clove, and our American palates just aren't that keen on it.
It is a pretty strong character if you're not careful.
Right.
And there's nothing subtle about my fruitcake barley wine until like a year after. It's a little potpourri-ish in the beginning.
Yeah, this barley wine, my wife came up with the name Rock'em Sock'em because it's a Ponche. Oh. And right, we even bought some Rock'em Sock'em kits for the bar. So if you come in, they're kind of floating around the dining room now, and my kids love them at least.
Yeah, there are bar fights happening all the time, but they're between this blue and red
right.
robot.
Exactly. And I have found I scaled up to the pro level. I don't have to let a beer sit for months and months to get to where it's good, drinkable. And that's not just me trying to hurry things along. There's probably some science that I just don't understand about things maturing and aging faster in these big vessels. But I still think this Ponche barley wine is going to be totally different if we still have it in like 2 months versus now. And maybe if I have the self-control and the foresight, I should pull some aside and let it sit for like a year and see what happens next year.
Yeah, I think the spices will fade, in my experience. The spices will fade. Obviously, the bitterness will probably fade a little bit as well. You're probably not going to have any effects of oxidation, as I sometimes have with my bottled beers. But how did the fruit flavors blend and evolve, through the fermentation process?
So I added them. I tend not to add fruit before fermentation because there's just too many variables there, too many wild cards. So I had made this beer out to be a little drier and thinner than a normal barley wine, knowing that all this fruit puree, and there's a significant amount, was going to balance that out. And then it's just a case of, how do the fruit flavors play with the esters, and
so
you do have to age them for a couple of weeks so they drop out into the bottom of the cone in the fermenter, so they're not all getting carried over into the final beer.
So there is is there some fermentation at that point, or is the beer too cold at that point to actually let the yeast work?
Yeah, I did it when it was too cold, and like I said, I think on the fruit episode, I tend to add fruit light enough that I'm not too concerned about re-fermentation, and I had it cold enough, a re-fermentation, and we don't bottle, so I'm not worrying about bottles exploding or anything like that.
I told you last week that I'm not doing dry January. I'm doing what I'm calling moist January. Mainly to irritate people who don't like the word moist. But I'm saving my beer calories for the weekends, and I'm very picky about the beers that I'm enjoying. And thanks to a recent swing through Tulsa, I have some beers from our friends and sponsors Desiree and Dave from High Gravity and Pippin's Tap Room. Now, unless you visit them in Tulsa, you can't get the finished products, but with their excellent ingredient kits at highgravitybrew.com, you can brew their taproom tested beers yourself. I'm talking Center of the Universe Midwest IPA, which is delicious, G6 Belgian Blonde, way good, and Doc Brown Imperial Brown Ale, a favorite of Susan's, all of which are currently residing in my fridge. If you want to stick with your own recipes, however, you can use the very handy Build Your Own Beer page on highgravitybrew.com. And, of course, if you want to raise your gear game, you can go to highgravitybrew.com and drool over all the Warthog electric system options. along with other manufacturers. And if you use the code EBC75BB, you can save $75 off your Warthog purchase. Check it all out at family-owned and operated HighGravityBrew.com. That's HighGravityBrew.com.
I haven't finished the disaster episode yet because that's a long one. But
yeah, I know.
I had to dump my first beer recently.
Oh no!
Still ground bombed. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were saying you had to dump your first ever beer, like your first beer that you ever brewed. But you dumped a commercial batch.
About 500 gallons. Yes. Yeah. It was my fault. It was these yeast storage containers I used. So yeast is usually the most expensive part of a lot of beer recipes at the commercial level and homebrew level too. And yeah, I probably reused some yeast in a way I shouldn't have, and the resulting beer. I've had worse commercial beers, but I did not go back to those breweries. So I kept sitting there. I'm like, I can throw in all this orange puree, and even bartender now BA and me, we were dosing, pints off the tank with orange juice. We found the level where like, this isn't terrible anymore, but we're like, it's still not something we want to sell to customers, And so we sent it down the drain. Lesson learned. I threw away the containers I was harvesting yeast from. I threw away all vinyl soft bits that had touched the beer. I did a really super deep clean, and then I did it the second time. I think I just had a yeast cross-contamination, not infection, but I think some previous yeast I thought I had gotten rid of was still hanging around. So, yeah, I don't know if doesn't make for an entertaining story on your disaster show. It's not homebrew level. But man, 500 gallons beer down the drain, that takes a while. And just the whole time it's happening there, it's just looking up at you from the gutter. It's just...
Oh, yeah, that's a heartbreaker.
It is, but lesson learned.
Yeah, exactly. You learned your lesson, and maybe you in telling your story here, you can offer some solace to other brewers out there who've pitched 5 gallons down the drain and felt bad about it.
And commercial brewers do it too. I've talked to some. They just don't tell stories about it. So it's happening. It's happening, and it should happen. If you never dump a beer down the drain, I question at least your experimental mindset. Maybe you're knocking them all out of the park because you're making just solid beers. But especially as a home brewer, if you're dumping one down the drain, don't feel bad. That's part of the path.
Yeah. Now, one last thing I wanted to talk to you about and touch on just briefly. You said that you've been playing with brewing or fermenting under pressure, which is, and I've heard some stuff about that, but we haven't addressed it, in depth on the show. But what's your experience in brewing under or fermenting under pressure, and why would you want to do it?
Yeah, so this is tapping back into that ethereal cloud of brewing ideas that I mentioned earlier. I was at an Oktoberfest beer fest. This was right around that time when we all seemed to get a reprieve from some of the COVID horrors, it seems. And we were actually able to do a couple beer festivals this year. And it was another pro brewer. I was at the booth next to me, and I won't call him out by name because the way he gave me this tip seemed like it was some big secret. But he's been on the show before. I'll give listeners that. He handed me a lager, and he's like, "Oh, what do you think of that?" And I was like, "Oh, it's really good. It's super clean." And he goes, yeah. I said, "What's the trick?" And he said, "Well, you ferment under pressure." And so we started talking, and I started doing some research. And right around this time, I started looking it up. I mean, like days later after he told me this, MBAA published a paper about fermenting under pressure. The Brewlosophy guys had a podcast around it. So it's nothing new. Apparently, even the homebrew world, a lot of stuff 5, 6 years ago, there was a lot of talk about it, but it was mostly in relation to uh, capturing hop volatiles. Scott Janish even had a paper, I think, in 2016, an article where, if you walk by a fermenting IPA and you can smell it, that means that aromatic's not in the beer anymore. But if
Right.
you apply pressure, you can lock that all into the liquid so it's not lost. And that's largely what I'd seen and heard about fermenting under pressure is to somewhere you're doing your normal fermentation and then you cap it off. You add dry hops and you cap it off and you ferment. Or I've heard about spunding, which is where you've got just a couple of gravity points left to go in the ferment and you cap off the tank. And then you naturally carbonate from the residual. This thing,
And
though,
using a special spunding valve,
yes, the spunding valve, yes.
so that you're not going to blow things up, essentially.
Right. Yes, that's a very real concern. Don't do any of this in glass. And I
Oh,
don't think any of this
definitely.
would ever work in plastic as well. So just stainless, just kegs too, for the most part. I know there are some homebrew fermenters that can work with pressure. So read that. Uh, I know my tanks up at the brewery are my big tanks are 30 psi. They're rated to, and the little ones are 15. So that's a huge range, just even at the professional level.
Hmm.
So pay attention to that. You don't want to create any bombs. Um, but yeah, I was talking to this guy back and forth, and I tried it with one of our regular flagship lagers, and you are able to, with this process, you ferment under pressure, you're able to ferment way hotter than normal and not experience those off flavors and those negative aspects of fermenting warm. So I was able to use my lager yeast, which says, hey, don't go any warmer than 58. I was able to ferment at 66
Wow.
and ferment super fast. I mean, I have a video where I was recording the spunding valve just going nuts because it was fermenting, chewed through that lager in just a matter of days. And then a week later, it still needed to drop clear. It was a little hazy in the glass, but it tasted crisp, clean, like it had been lagering for forever.
Huh. Well, first of
So
all,
I,
66 is around, what, 17 is that right? Yeah, around 17 Celsius, somewhere around there.
yeah, I should know, but and to that point, so I got really excited about this, and I was telling some other pro brewer friends, and they're like, "Yeah, we've fermented under pressure before. That's no big deal." And then looking online, and apparently this has been something brewers in Europe have been doing for like decades. So thanks, guys, for keeping that one under your hat. And the MBAA, I guess, I don't know. I haven't dug deep enough that they published the study now. Maybe it's starting to get interest stateside, and that's this serendipity coincidence thing that's happening here. Maybe we as in the U.S. has just been doing it with hoppy beers, like I mentioned, but there seems to be this interest now, and maybe from the get-go, fermenting under pressure.
So what
And
about
maybe others have
if
done it, and I'm just now late to the party.
well, if you're fermenting a lager, what about those? If you've ever been around a lager yeast as it's fermenting, it smells like sulfur. What about diacetyl? What about the off flavors that should be off gassing into the environment? Do they just go through the spunding valve?
Yes. Yeah, no, that's the concern, and that seems to hold some people back from trying it. And maybe it should have for me, but no, I have not. No, and I've done a few of these now under my belt. Uh, I'm not getting any sulfur, and I can tend to pick out sulfur in commercial lagers. Especially you get a European lager, and as soon as you crack open that can, take a whiff, and that's that sulfur, and it dissipates pretty quick. I'm not getting that here. I'm getting it very much. It tastes, for lack of a better term, this first lager I did tasted like a European lager, so it had that right level of sulfur. And my guess is it's fermenting under pressure, but it is still off gassing. So the spooning valve has this little, it's an adjustable pressure relief valve. So it is wanting, fermentation is causing the pressure to go beyond 15 psi. So this is typically when you ferment under pressure, it's like 0.8 to 1 bar or around 13 to 15 psi. Active fermentation will want to push the headspace beyond that. And so there is still off-gassing. There was still a noticeable increase in CO2 on our CO2 monitor in our brew house when we were doing this. So I think my guess is, especially at that heightened temperature, this stuff is still burning off. So I got less diacetyl, perceived diacetyl. We don't have any way to measure it scientifically, but I perceive less diacetyl in this batch than the previous batch.
Wow, interesting. So on the homebrew side of things, it just means more toys to buy,
right? And I'm really excited about it. And like I said, maybe this is all old news for other brewers, or maybe it's I'm spilling the beans on some very well hidden beans. But I'm excited about it. And I played around with it, like I said, with a few beers since then, and I even did it with an ale that I just wanted to be super clean. And yeah, I mean, it seems to be, the science of it seems to be that it's the CO2 you're pushing back into solution is kind of suppressing the yeast from expressing these off flavors or these volatiles. You're kind of putting the pillows slightly over their head when they're sleeping, not until totally smother them out. So you do want to have a higher cell count when you do it. You don't want to underpitch when you're trying this.
Huh. It's interesting. It seems like every week there's something new to try to wrap my head around. And there's less of my head, it seems, to wrap around things than there used to be. I can't keep track of stuff.
Yeah, this I mean, this just blows my mind. I've been homebrewing in brewing, I guess, for 16 plus years now, and lagers as a homebrewer was always out of reach for me because I didn't have that kind of patience, for one, and two, I didn't have that kind of always the best temperature control. But I mean, this thing, that kind of gets rid of that issue. If you just get one of these little homebrew spunding valves, it sounds like you could turn around a lager pretty quick and have it pretty clean.
Huh. Or just use Kvike.
Or just Kvike, yeah.
All right, Adam. Well, I look forward to talking again, and I hope you have a healthy, happy, prosperous 2022.
Yeah, same to you. It's been fun, James. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Adam. After talking to Adam, I have an itch to do another small batch barley wine with some spices and some fruit. Maybe I'll follow the Ponche inspiration. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check all that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.